The celestial bastion had stood as the galaxy's shield for centuries, an unyielding fortress of hope and strength. Built by a coalition of civilizations, its mere existence deterred the galaxy's greatest threats. But when the Aether Swarm attacked, it fell in a single, horrifying night. News of the Bastion's destruction swept through the galaxy like a wildfire. Refugees from fallen systems flooded safe havens, carrying tales of a relentless, insectoid horde that consumed everything in its path. Planets burned, alliances crumbled, and despair settled over the galaxy like an unshakable shadow. On Earth, Captain Leora Kane watched the chaos unfold from the solitude of her apartment in New Terrace City. Once a celebrated commander of Earth's space fleet, she had been relegated to the sidelines after a disastrous mission that cost her an entire squadron. Her career, her reputation, and even her own sense of purpose had been shattered. The galaxy's collapse now played out on every holoscreen, a grim reminder of how far she had fallen. The Aether Swarm had yet to reach Earth, but Kane knew it was only a matter of time. Humanity had long been considered an afterthought in galactic affairs, seen as an isolated, stubborn species that refused to fully integrate into the broader interstellar community. Earth's defenses were meager compared to the power of the Bastion, and without it, humanity's survival seemed impossible. A sharp knock on her door jolted her from her thoughts. It was Admiral Tessa Valen, her former commanding officer. The Admiral wasted no time with pleasantries, tossing a data slate onto Kane's cluttered table. "You need to see this," Valen said, her tone grim. Kane picked up the slate and scanned the contents. It contained fragments of encrypted data recovered from the Bastion's wreckage. At first glance, it seemed like little more than corrupted files, but one detail caught her eye. The encryption signature was unmistakably human. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. This was designed by us?" Kane asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Partially," Valen confirmed. "When the Bastion was constructed, humanity contributed key elements to its design. That data suggests we were responsible for its most critical systems that might hold the key to rebuilding it." Kane stared at the slate, her mind racing. If Earth had once played such a vital role in the Bastion's creation, then perhaps they could do so again. But rebuilding the Bastion, it sounded impossible, even reckless. Valen leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The swarm is coming, Lador. If we don't act now, Earth will burn like the others. We need you back in the fight." For the first time in years, Kane felt a spark reignite within her. The galaxy's last defense had fallen, but perhaps humanity could rise to build something even stronger. Earth's council chamber was a relic of old-world ambition. Vaulted ceilings, holographic displays flickering with the projections of representatives from scattered colonies, and the hum of tense voices echoing through the room. Captain Leora Kane stood at the center, her uniform crisp but outdated, her presence drawing wary eyes from every corner. She had not been here in years, not since the day her command fell apart. The debate was already raging when she arrived. "We cannot risk what little we have left," one counselor bellowed, his voice thick with exasperation. "Earth's resources are stretched thin, our fleet is in shambles, and our colonies are barely holding on. A full-scale mobilization would be suicide." Another rose in rebuttal. "And doing nothing is worse. The Aether Swarm doesn't negotiate. It doesn't stop. If we wait, Earth will become another graveyard, just like the systems we've abandoned." The room erupted into chaos. Kane tightened her grip on the data slate in her hand. Admiral Valen had warned her it would be like this, fractured, desperate. But as the voices clashed, she could feel the fire in her chest growing. The weight of the Bastion's remnants in her hands demanded action, demanded someone to rise and take charge. Finally, she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the din. "We've spent too long hiding." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to her. Kane's gaze swept the room, her voice steady but fierce. "I've seen what the swarm can do. We all have. Running isn't going to save us. Waiting isn't going to save us. The galaxy's strongest defense is gone, and no one else is coming to help. But Earth still stands. We've built wonders before, things others said were impossible. And we can do it again. She held up the slate, the flickering image of the Bastion's fragmented schematics casting a faint glow. The Bastion was our legacy, our contribution to the galaxy's survival. This data proves it. We don't just have the knowledge to rebuild it. We have the responsibility to try. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some counselors exchanged skeptical glances, while others leaned forward with cautious interest. Kane could see the weight of doubt in their expressions, but she pressed on. Yes, it will be dangerous. Yes, it will demand sacrifices. But what other choice do we have? If we do nothing, the swarm will erase us. If we act, we have a chance, not just to survive, but to lead. The murmurs grew louder, but this time they carried a different tone. Possibility, curiosity, even hope. Admiral Valen rose from her seat. I support Captain Kane's proposal. If there's even a chance this plan could succeed, it's worth the risk. The council fell into deliberation, but Kane's part was done. As she stepped out of the chamber, Valen caught her arm. You've lit a spark, Valen said with a faint smile. Now let's see if you can turn it into a fire. Kane nodded. The fight was only beginning. The starship Resolute, battered and aged yet reliable, tore through hyperspace with an urgency its engines hadn't seen in decades. Captain Leora Kane stood on the bridge, her sharp eyes fixed on the swirling vortex outside the viewport. Behind her, the crew moved with practiced precision. Pilots, engineers, and specialists hastily assembled from Earth's dwindling ranks. They weren't the galaxy's finest, but they were all Kane had, and she intended to make them count. Their destination, the war-torn planet of Erinder V, a desolate wasteland ravaged during the swarm's initial incursions. The fragments of the Bastion's schematics pointed to a secret human outpost buried beneath the planet's surface, a facility that once housed experimental technology critical to the Bastion's design. If it still existed, it could provide the breakthrough they desperately needed. Kane's voice broke through the hum of activity. ETA to Erinder. 5 minutes, Captain, replied Lieutenant Kerr, the Resolute's navigator. Kane nodded, then turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mira Solon, who had spent the past hour meticulously scanning for potential threats. Anything on sensors? Nothing yet, but this place hasn't been quiet for years, Solon replied grimly. If the swarm doesn't find us, scavengers might. Kane clenched her jaw. Erinder V wasn't just a dead world. It was a battlefield littered with the wreckage of ships and dreams. Scavenger factions, opportunists who thrived on galactic chaos, prowled its surface like vultures. Kane had dealt with their kind before, and she knew they'd kill for whatever secrets lay buried on that planet. The ship jolted as it exited hyperspace, the swirling void giving way to the bleak expanse of Erinder. The planet loomed below, its surface scorched and lifeless, the remnants of shattered cities visible even from orbit. Kane's stomach tightened. Prepare for descent, she ordered. The Resolute punched through the atmosphere, its hull trembling as it entered the turbulence of the ruined world. The crew braced themselves, tension thick in the air. As the ship descended, the planet's surface came into clearer view. Endless fields of wreckage, jagged terrain scarred by orbital bombardments, and faint plumes of toxic gas rising into the sky. Target coordinates locked, Solon announced. The facility should be beneath that ridge. Kane's gaze narrowed as she studied the display. The ridge was surrounded by the carcasses of downed ships and tanks, evidence of a long-forgotten battle. Scans? Energy readings beneath the surface, Solon confirmed. It's faint, but it's there. No signs of the swarm yet, but she paused, her brow furrowing. Captain, we've got incoming. Multiple contacts, fast and low. Scavengers, Kane muttered. The tactical display lit up as a swarm of small, heavily armed ships appeared on the horizon. They were closing in fast, weapons primed. Kane turned to the crew, her voice sharp. Battle stations. This mission doesn't end here. Whatever's down there, we're getting it. Hold the line. The Resolute veered toward the ridge, its guns blazing as the scavengers opened fire. The fight for humanity's forgotten secrets had begun. The Resolute limped back into hyperspace, its hull scorched and riddled with battle scars from the skirmish on Arinder V. The mission had been a brutal success. Kane's team had retrieved vital data cores and a piece of forgotten technology, a prototype energy amplifier once intended to power the Bastion's shield array. But the cost was heavy. Several crew members were injured, and the ship's systems were strained to the breaking point. Kane sat in the dimly lit strategy room, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy's fractured factions. Earth couldn't rebuild the Bastion alone. The resources needed were vast, and time was slipping through their fingers. The swarm was relentless, and even now reports came in of their approach toward the outer colonies. Kane clenched her fists, her mind racing. Admiral Valen's holographic image flickered beside her. We need allies, Leora. The swarm will overwhelm us if we stay divided. Allies, Kane repeated bitterly. The same factions that left us out of the Bastion's original command structure. The ones who abandoned entire systems to save themselves. Valen's expression softened. Desperate times make for unlikely partnerships. You know that better than anyone. Kane exhaled, her gaze settling on a highlighted star system on the map. Hixera Prime, home to the Xendari, a fiercely independent and technologically advanced race. Known for their orbital shipyards, they had the means to construct the Bastion's larger components. But the Xendari had been staunchly neutral, refusing to commit to the coalition even before the swarm's rise. They won't listen to us, Kane said. They will if you give them a reason, Valen replied. They've suffered losses too, and they know neutrality won't save them forever. Offer them something they can't ignore. Kane's jaw tightened as a plan began to form. The amplifier, she murmured. It's a prototype, but if we can demonstrate its potential. Valen nodded. It might be enough to sway them. But the Xendari are cautious. You'll need more than technology to earn their trust. The Resolute emerged from hyperspace above Hixera Prime, its battered exterior a stark contrast to the pristine orbital platforms encircling the planet. Xendari ships swarmed around them like a warning, sleek and bristling with advanced weaponry. Diplomatic envoy to Resolute, a crisp, alien voice transmitted. State your purpose or prepare to be escorted out of Hixeran space. Kane stepped forward, projecting calm authority. This is Captain Leora Kane of the Earth vessel Resolute. We seek an audience with your council to discuss the reconstruction of the Bastion. There was a long silence before the reply came. You may approach, but know this. The Xendari do not suffer fools. The tension aboard the Resolute was palpable as they docked at the orbital platform. Kane, flanked by her team, entered the Grand Council chamber of the Xendari. Towering figures with shimmering skin and sharp, analytical eyes watched her every move. Earth has a proposal, Kane began, holding up the amplifier. One that could tip the balance of this war, not just for humanity, but for all of us. The room buzzed with hushed voices. The Xendari leader, a figure of imposing stature, leaned forward. Speak carefully, human. You tread a dangerous path. Kane took a steadying breath, knowing that the survival of their mission, and perhaps the galaxy, hung on what she said next. The Xendari Council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, its crystalline walls shimmering with iridescent light. Captain Leora Kane stood in the center of the circular room, her eyes meeting the gaze of the Xendari leader, Prime Architect Valen. The towering figure exuded an aura of cold calculation, their multifaceted eyes studying Kane with unsettling intensity. Around the chamber, the other counselors whispered among themselves, their voices a soft hum of curiosity and skepticism. Kane set the prototype energy amplifier on the pedestal before her. The sleek device pulsed faintly with a blue glow, its presence commanding the room's attention. "This," Kane began, her voice firm, "is humanity's contribution to the Bastion. A prototype energy amplifier capable of generating the shield powerful enough to withstand the swarm's attacks. It was abandoned before it could be fully realized, but with your help, we can bring it to life. Together, we can rebuild the Bastion and turn the tide of this war." Vaylon's eyes narrowed. "An intriguing device, Captain Kane. But words and relics from the past will not sway the Xendari. Your people are known for their bold promises and reckless ambitions. Why should we risk our resources and lives for a species that has often stood alone?" Kane straightened, the weight of the galaxy's survival pressing on her shoulders. "Because the swarm doesn't care about borders, species, or alliances. They will come for you, just as they've come for us. The Bastion was built to protect everyone, and now it's gone. If we don't unite, there will be no Xendari, no humans, no one left to rebuild." The chamber fell silent. Kane's words hung in the air like a challenge, daring the counselors to look beyond their isolation. One of the younger Xendari counselors, a scientist named Myrath, stepped forward. "If what she says is true, the amplifier could revolutionize our defenses. The Bastion was a marvel of engineering, but it failed. Perhaps this is an opportunity to build something even greater." Vaylon raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "And yet, to rebuild the Bastion is to invite the swarm's wrath. Such a project will make us a target." "They're already coming for all of us," Kane countered. "You've seen the reports. How long do you think you can remain neutral while the galaxy burns around you?" Vaylon's gaze lingered on Kane before shifting to the amplifier. Finally, they spoke, their voice calm but weighted. "The Xendari will not commit blindly. We will assist in this endeavor, but only if you prove your worth. There is an abandoned orbital forge in the Yrinx Nebula, a facility once used to construct components of the Bastion. It is infested with swarm remnants. Clear it, and we will provide the resources and expertise you require." Kane's heart sank. It was a monumental task, a dangerous one, but she knew it was the only way forward. She nodded. "We'll do it." Vaylon's expression was unreadable. "Then may your resolve match your ambition, Captain Kane. The galaxy's fate may depend on it." As Kane and her team returned to the Resolute, the weight of their mission grew heavier. They had secured a tentative alliance, but the price was steep. The Yrinx Nebula awaited, a deadly proving ground where failure meant not just their own deaths, but the end of any hope for unity. The Resolute hung in the void just outside the Yrinx Nebula, a roiling mass of brilliant reds and golds illuminated by volatile gas clouds. The nebula was a natural forge, its superheated plasma streams perfect for constructing the advanced alloys once used in the Bastion. But it was also a graveyard. Wreckage of long-abandoned ships floated like ghostly sentinels, and the faint signatures of swarm remnants danced erratically on the ship's sensors. Captain Leora Kane stood on the bridge, her face a mask of determination. Around her, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The Xendari had not exaggerated the danger. If the Resolute failed to clear the forge, the fragile alliance with the Xendari would shatter, and Earth's hopes of rebuilding the Bastion would crumble. Lieutenant Mira Solon leaned over her console, her voice steady but tense. "Captain, we've confirmed multiple swarm signatures near the forge. Small drones, but their numbers are significant. If they detect us, they'll swarm the ship." Kane nodded. "We're not here to fight an army. We need to get in, secure the forge's core systems, and get out. Stealth is our priority." She turned to Chief Engineer Doran, whose bulky frame was hunched over a schematic of the forge. "Doran, will the amplifier prototype hold up in the nebula's conditions?" Doran hesitated, his weathered hands brushing against the glowing display. "It'll take some fine-tuning, but it should work. The amplifier can disrupt the swarm's communications in a localized area, but it's untested. We'll need to activate it near the core for maximum effect." "Then let's hope it's as good as advertised," Kane said, a faint edge to her voice. The Resolute crept into the nebula, its shield straining against the waves of electromagnetic interference. Kane's orders came in quick bursts, precise movements to avoid detection by the swarm's patrolling drones. The bridge was silent except for the hum of systems and the occasional static-laden update from Solon. "Visual on the forge," Solon announced, her voice breaking the tension. The forge emerged from the swirling gases, a colossal structure of blackened metal and shattered scaffolding. Its core, a glowing sphere of energy at its heart, pulsed faintly, a beacon of both hope and danger. Around it, swarm drones flitted like predatory insects, their angular forms reflecting the nebula's fiery light. "Deploy the away team," Kane ordered. "Doran, you're with me. Solon, you have the bridge." A small shuttle broke away from the Resolute, weaving through the debris field toward the forge. Inside, Kane and her team sat in tense silence, each member clutching their weapons and equipment. The shuttle docked with a hiss, its landing shaky on the forge's battered platform. The airlock opened, revealing a dark, oppressive interior. The team moved cautiously, their lights cutting through the gloom. Doran worked quickly, connecting the amplifier prototype to the forge's mainframe. The device hummed to life, its energy radiating outward. "Swarm drones are redirecting," Doran warned, sweat beading on his brow. "We've got about 5 minutes before they're on us." Kane's comm crackled. "Captain." Solon's voice came through, strained. "The drones are massing. They're heading straight for the forge. Whatever you're doing, you need to finish it now." Kane's heart pounded. "Doran, how much longer?" "Just a few more seconds." The forge rumbled as the amplifier sent out a pulse, disrupting the drone's coordination. But the swarm was relentless, and their screeches echoed through the corridors as they closed in. "Team, fall back to the shuttle," Kane ordered, covering Doran as he sealed the amplifier's activation. They ran, the drones swarming behind them, their metallic bodies clanging against the walls. The team barely made it to the shuttle, the airlock sealing just as the drones collided with it. As the shuttle launched, Kane watched the forge's core flare with renewed energy. The amplifier had worked, but they had only just escaped with their lives. The Resolute jumped back into hyperspace moments later, battered but victorious. Kane exhaled deeply, her hands trembling. They had proven themselves, but the cost of rebuilding the Bastion was growing heavier with every step. And the swarm was learning. The Resolute drifted in the stillness of deep space, its crew exhausted but exhilarated. The mission to secure the Orcs nebula's forge had been a resounding success. The amplifier was now fully operational, its potential confirmed. The forge's core had been reactivated, and with it, the possibility of rebuilding the Bastion. But victory felt hollow. The crew had seen the true cost of war, the toll on both body and soul. Kane could sense it in their eyes as they moved about the ship, each person carrying the weight of the fight in their own way. For all their triumphs, the shadow of the swarm loomed larger with every passing day. Kane stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "What's our status, Solon?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Solon was at her post, fingers flying over the controls. "We're safe for now. No swarm ships detected, but we're pushing into the core systems. The Xendari are preparing to send us the necessary components to complete the amplifier integration. They've also given us a timetable, 2 weeks to prepare for the next phase." Kane nodded, but the knot in her stomach remained. 2 weeks. It seemed like both an eternity and a blink of an eye. "Captain," Doran's voice came over the comm. "I finished the preliminary design for the upgraded amplifier integration. I'll need more materials, specific alloys from the mining moons in the Corvix system. The Xendari are offering their support, but it's going to require a full fleet." Kane exhaled sharply. "The Corvix system is a war zone. We'll have to take it by force." "I know," Doran replied, "but without those materials, we're stuck. The amplifier needs to be reinforced to handle the full-scale energy output. Anything less, and we risk destabilizing it. Kane turned, pacing across the bridge. Every decision felt like a calculated gamble. Resources were running thin, and the Xendari, while now allies, weren't offering the level of commitment that would guarantee success. She knew she couldn't trust their motivations fully, but she had no choice. They were too critical to ignore. "Prepare the fleet," Kane said finally, her voice cold with determination. "We're going to the Corvix system." The Resolute jumped into hyperspace once more, the stars streaking by as the ship cut through the void toward their next battleground. As they neared the Corvix system, the stark contrast between the bustling mining moons and the desolate battlefield ahead became clear. The swarm had already infiltrated. The once thriving moons were now scared and half destroyed, their orbital stations abandoned or overtaken. Remnants of the last mining fleet floated in space, a grim reminder of what had been lost. "Captain, we've got incoming," Solon warned, her eyes flashing across the tactical display. Multiple swarm capital ships preparing to engage. Kane's gaze hardened. The stakes had escalated again. She turned to her crew, her resolve firm. "We don't have the luxury of a fight we can't win. Prepare for combat. This isn't just a mission for resources anymore. This is our last chance." As the fleet gathered its forces, Kane could already hear the faint hum of battle in the distance. The Xendari would fight alongside them. But Kane knew the truth. Their future, and the future of humanity, rested not only on the outcome of the upcoming battle, but on the fragile alliances they had forged. Trust, too, was a commodity in short supply. The Resolute entered the heart of the Corvix system, its weapons powered up, ready for the coming storm. Kane felt the weight of her decisions pressing harder with each passing second. She wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival anymore. She was fighting to secure the fragile hope that one day the galaxy could rebuild and stand united once again. But that hope, like everything else, came at a steep price. "Engage," Kane ordered, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Let's show them the power of humanity's last stand." The battle erupted as soon as the Resolute entered the Corvix system's core. The distant mining moons, once vital to the galaxy's economy, were now engulfed in the chaos of war. Swarm capital ships loomed like monstrous shadows, their jagged forms cutting through the dark expanse of space. They were a reminder of the relentless nature of the alien menace, a reminder that every victory came at a cost. Kane stood at the helm, her fingers gripping the command chair as she watched the tactical display unfold before her. The fleet had been reinforced by the Xendari, but even with their advanced technology, the numbers were not in their favor. The swarm outnumbered them, and their vessels were like a swarm of locusts, relentlessly charging forward in perfect formation. "Enemy fleet closing in, Captain," Solon reported, her voice calm despite the growing tension. "They've deployed drones and fighter ships. We're outnumbered 4-1. Kane's mind raced as she ran the calculations. They couldn't afford to engage in a prolonged battle. The Xendari were formidable, but they couldn't hold the line indefinitely. The amplifier was their only hope. Its power could potentially turn the tide, but only if it was deployed correctly. "Prepare the amplifier for activation," Kane ordered, her voice unwavering. "Doran, get that thing online now." On the bridge, Doran's voice came through the comm, tense but focused. "It's ready, Captain, but we'll need to get closer to the enemy flagship. The interference is too strong for a long-range deployment." Kane's pulse quickened. The risk was immense. Getting close to a swarm flagship meant they would be in the heart of the enemy's firepower, vulnerable to a deadly counterattack. But there was no other choice. If they didn't act now, the swarm would overwhelm the entire fleet. "We'll make the run," Kane said, her decision final. "Solon, give me a straight shot to the flagship. Full speed ahead." Solon nodded, her hands moving deftly over the controls as she navigated the Resolute through the incoming fire. The ship rocked violently as drones and smaller ships latched onto the hull, firing at will. The crew was already engaged in damage control, working furiously to keep the ship intact. "We're taking heavy fire," Solon shouted over the din of explosions. "Shields are holding, but for how long?" Kane felt the ship shudder beneath her as another volley hit the port side. The Resolute was battered, but it wasn't broken. Yet, they were closing the distance, and with every passing moment, the Swarm flagship loomed larger on the view screen. It was a behemoth, its hull a twisted amalgamation of alien technology, its weapons bristling with power. "Now, Doran," Kane barked. The amplifier hummed to life, its energy coursing through the ship like a living thing. The Resolute surged forward, its engines screaming as they pushed toward the heart of the Swarm fleet. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The entire bridge held its breath. Then, with a violent pulse, the amplifier activated. A shockwave of energy rippled outward, tearing through the Swarm's communications and disrupting their coordination. The enemy ships faltered, their once precise movements descending into chaos. "Impact. Direct hit," Solon shouted. "We've crippled their flagship's defenses. It's going down." The battle was far from over, but the momentum had shifted. The Swarm flagship, now vulnerable, began to disintegrate under the combined fire of the Resolute and the Incendiary forces. Kane's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the flagship break apart, its death throes sending shockwaves through the remaining Swarm fleet. The tide of battle had turned, but Kane knew it was only a temporary victory. The Swarm would learn, adapt, and return. The cost of their success had been heavy. Many ships in the fleet were in critical condition, and the Resolute itself was barely holding together. "We've done it," Kane said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and dread. "But the war is far from over." The crew gathered around her, each face marked with exhaustion and determination. They had won this battle, but the path to rebuilding the Bastion and humanity's future was still uncertain. The alliances they had forged, the sacrifices they had made, and the technology they had unlocked would be their foundation. But it would take more than just power to rebuild the galaxy. It would take hope, unity, and the unwavering spirit of humanity. The Resolute drifted through the wreckage of the battle, the stars once again seeming endless. Kane looked out toward the horizon of deep space, knowing that Earth's fight had only just begun, and they would never stop fighting.